Let me take you on a journey into the world of Thomas Trew and the hidden people. Hello and welcome to my place. This is Sophie Masson, here to tell you about Thomas Trew and the hidden people. I'd like to tell you about the whole series, about how it came about, the inspirations and the sources, and I'd like to tell you a bit about the hidden world itself and how it differs from our world, the obvious world, which is what the hidden people call it. Many writers have had the idea of a hidden world that could be reached in some way through our own world. In the Chronicles of Narnia, for instance, it was through a wardrobe. And in Alice Through the Looking Glass, it was through the mirror that Alice went. While in Harry Potter, of course, it's through platform 9 3/4. But my hidden world was inspired by something very different. That's right, it came out of a dream. And in that dream, I was walking down the street and I suddenly came across a little cafe. And the cafe was called the Apple Tree Cafe. And I walked in and there was a long, narrow passageway just as you came into the cafe. I walked down this narrow passageway. I could see another door at the end, and on this door was painted an apple tree. And I opened the door, and as soon as I did that, a little voice said to me from the darkness beyond, "We are the hidden people." And it was at that moment that I woke up and I thought, oh my God, who are these people? Who are these hidden people? What sort of world do they live in? And what kind of things go on there? And I really wanted to find out as much as I could. So I wrote down my dream, and I thought about it, and I thought, this is an idea for a story. This has been given to me in a dream and I have to follow it. I have to find out who these hidden people are and what their world is like. I've always been very fond of fairy tales. I love them ever since I was a little girl. In fact, probably my earliest fairy tales. And probably also my earliest writing. I read all kinds of things, and because I come from France originally, a lot of my reading was done in French, so I read all the stories of Perrault and so on, and then of Grimm and many others. And my grandmother used to tell me lots and lots of stories too. And I loved all those stories where you went into another world, a world where anything was possible and everything was possible. And this was what I wanted my hidden world to be like as well. I wanted it to be like the wonderful places I had visited in my childhood through those wonderful stories. And I read more and more, of course, as I got older, and when I came to Australia and started reading English language children's books as well. And I still read lots and lots of fairy tales and lots of places, about places that were wonderful and where anything could happen. I was the kind of kid who always thought about what would happen if a fairy came along and gave you 3 wishes. And I thought, I'm not going to be like all those silly people in fairy tales who ask for something ridiculous, like sausages and things like that, and then they have to basically change their wishes. What I thought I'd do was I'd ask for a magic wand, and I thought, a magic wand will give me all the wishes I want, every single one. And so every time I thought about it, I thought, I'll be well prepared when a fairy comes along and gives me 3 wishes. Now, it didn't eventuate, but in fact, what I think now is that I have been given a magic wand which is the wand of writing, which is the way of creating worlds like the world that Thomas goes into. My actual inspiration for Thomas himself, at least for his destiny as a rhymer and also his name, came from an old Scottish ballad which is called the Ballad of True Thomas. And it's a story which is goes back to somebody in the 12th century called Thomas of Ercildown, who was a poet and also a prophet. And the story was told in this ballad that Thomas was lying under an apple tree. You remember that Apple Tree Cafe? Anyway, there he is lying under the apple tree, asleep. And he suddenly wakes up and sees this beautiful lady sitting on a white horse looking at him. And he says to her, "Who are you?" And she says, "Are you the Queen of Heaven?" he says. And she says, no, 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 I am the Queen of Elfland, or the Queen of Fairyland, and I have come to take you into my country, into Elfland, and there you will learn many things and you will discover many things. And when you go out again, we will give you a gift. And so he hops up on the horse behind her, and she tells him, don't eat anything in Elfland except for the apples. And so they pick lots and lots of apples, and off he goes to Elfland. And of course in Elfland, like in most hidden worlds, time passes differently from what it does in our world. And anyway, so he's in there for quite a long time. And when he goes out again, they give him a gift. And that's the gift of prophecy and poetry. And that's why he was known afterwards as Trew Thomas, because the things he said came true. And so, in fact, that was the idea, the inspiration behind the name of Thomas. I just reversed it so that it was Thomas Trew. And it was T-R-E-W rather than T-R-U-E. That's something quite exciting, which I'll tell you about. But anyway, so Trew Thomas was the inspiration for Thomas Trew. Also, the fact that he was called Thomas the Rhymer. And in my world, what rhymers are actually are people who have a special talent of some sort. And often they don't know what it is until they've actually gone into the hidden world and discovered it. Now, rhymers are actually invited into the hidden world, whereas witches and wizards and magicians and enchanters can go in because they also like to visit the hidden world, but they have to have special passports and visas and things like that. The rhymers come in and out on invitation, and they can stay as long as they like. And often when they go out again, they're given a gift, like for instance the gift of poetry, the gift of song, the gift of story, the gift of painting, the gift of being very good at science, all kinds of things they can be given. And this is what will happen to Thomas at the end. I'd like to tell you a little bit about one of the wonderful source material books that I use. And it's an absolutely wonderful book, A Dictionary of Fairies. There's lots and lots of wonderful ideas in it, wonderful stories. Basically, it's a dictionary of all the different kinds of creatures and stories that abound in the magical folklore of the British Isles. And for instance, I got a few names out of this book. For instance, Hinky Punk Hobthrust, who's the trickster in the hidden world, or at least he's a trickster in our church, in the village where Thomas goes to live. And in fact, I found his name in this book. It just sounded like such a wonderful name, and I thought, I've got to have this for my book. Now, Hinky Punk is one of the many names for Will-o'-the-Wisp, who is a trickster as well. So I think that that worked really well. And Hobthrust is another name for Puck. So it's another name for a sort of a tricky kind of creature. So together it makes a very tricky sort of name. I got quite a few things out of this absolutely marvellous book, which I highly recommend to have in any library. It's really packed full of wonderful information. There's quite a lot about Thomas the Rhymer in here as well, if you're interested.